I was entrusted with the honor on behalf of His Excellency Paul Biya, President of the Republic of Cameroon, Head of State, and he instructed me to speak in his name. Allow me, therefore, to renew Cameroon's warm congratulations on your election as President of the 80th session of the General Assembly of our organization. Your diplomatic experience and vision, which encourage us to unite our efforts for a better future, are guarantees of success for both your mandate and deliberations throughout this session. You can count in this regard on the full cooperation from the Cameroonian delegation. As you know, my country was honored to see your predecessor, Ambassador Philemon Young, preside over the 79th session of the General Assembly. And I would like here to commend his commitment, his professionalism, and his determination, which was marked by his spirit of being able to listen and conduct a dialogue as he fulfilled his mandate. Let me also reiterate to Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, the sincere appreciation of Cameroon for his tireless efforts at the helm of our organization, and for his clear commitment to strengthen multilateralism in an international context which happens to be particularly difficult and complex. Madam President, Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, Mr. Secretary General, and distinguished representatives, we meet this year at a pivotal moment for our organization, which is celebrating its 80th anniversary. And anniversaries are usually joyful occasions, but we must acknowledge that this particular one leaves us with questions. This is an opportunity for us to take stock and reflect on how we can make the United Nations more effective in fulfilling its missions and recommendations and promises contained in the Charter. You therefore proposed in this regard, Madam President, that we pool our will, our efforts, and our resources. And you believe, and rightly so, that we are better together. Cameroon shares this vision and welcomes the theme we have chosen for our discussion, which is, I quote, "Better Together, 80 years and more for peace, development, and human rights." End of quote. This theme is more than just a slogan. It is a relevant program that we must translate into concrete actions at both the national and international levels. The union of our forces is the very foundation of the UN Charter. Its founding fathers understood that maintaining international peace and security and promoting economic and social development for all could only result from our collective labor. And that is why we must maintain this dynamic for the well-being of our populations. Madam President, the UN was created to be, at the same time, a beacon of hope, a forum for dialogue, and a catalyst for concrete actions so as to build a more just, safer, and more united world. And 80 years later, it is useful, as I mentioned earlier, it is useful to take stock and draw lessons for the future. So the following questions arise here. Have we succeeded? Have we managed to shield our peoples from the fear of war? Uncertainty about their future? Have we succeeded to shield our peoples from famine? The current international situation, which is marked by numerous crises, offers a clear and negative answer to these questions. Indeed, in 2025, the global security environment remains, unfortunately, characterized by a proliferation of conflicts and threats of all kinds to human security, including the nuclear threat, which we once thought to be a thing of the past. Whether in Europe, Central Asia, the Middle East, Latin America, or Africa, tensions are emerging or persisting, endangering peace, stability, and international security more than ever before. The ongoing armed conflicts around the world are a painful reminder for us that 80 years later, we neither could nor would succeed in protecting the world from the scourge of war. And this situation is further compounded by various natural disasters, including extreme weather events such as storms, hurricanes, forest fires, earthquakes, landslides, which cause significant material damage and loss of human lives, not to mention various pandemics on that list. The world will only meet the challenge of development if it first wins the challenge of peace. We have a historic responsibility to choose. Either we allow war and these multiple scourges to thrive, or we offer our children a stable, united, and prosperous world. And Cameroon has made its choice. It made the choice of peace and development and stands firmly by your side in order to turn this aspiration into a shared reality. Madam President, Your Excellencies, it is well known that there can be no development without peace, nor can there be lasting peace without development. The ongoing crises, which negatively affect international trade, the cost of raw materials, and market supplies undoubtedly hinder the development of many countries. And yet, economic development through the Sustainable Development Goals remains a primary objective that the United Nations must attain for the well-being of our peoples. In recent years, however, we have seen with regret that millions of people still live in extreme poverty, facing disease and food insecurity. In this particular context, children, women, and the elderly, and people with reduced mobility are the most vulnerable. And although access to education has expanded, many children and young people remain outside of the school system. At the same time, we observe a decline in life expectancy. We see deteriorating health indicators and a critical shortage of healthcare professionals, especially in Africa. With 5 years remaining until the SDG deadline, it is urgent that coordinated actions be taken to fulfill the promises of the 2030 Agenda. We must indeed take our responsibility individually and collectively so as to achieve these goals that we had freely and voluntarily set for ourselves. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Cameroon, a ward of the United Nations, remains committed to the purposes and principles of the United Nations Charter and spares no effort under the high leadership of His Excellency Paul Biya, President of the Republic, to promote peace and international security. And in this spirit, my country actively participates in UN peacekeeping operations and, through its 3 major specialized schools, trains police, gendarmerie, and other African civilian personnel who take part in these operations. Moreover, Cameroon remains consistently engaged in the fight against terrorism in general, in the Sahel, and particularly in the Lake Chad basin, where the Boko Haram sect operates. Now, in economic terms, my country has adopted an ambitious national strategy that promotes harmonious economic and social development across the nation, whilst advancing democracy, respect for human rights, and good governance. This allows us to progressively and systematically realize the Sustainable Development Goals and the African Union's Agenda 2063, among others. Madam President, in the Congo Basin, Cameroon actively contributes to finding solutions to global climate change and to protecting wildlife and biodiversity. He will always do its part and expect that promises made, especially in terms of financing, will be honored. For Cameroon, It is essential that the efforts of developing countries be supported. In this regard, it is worth recalling yet once again that over a decade ago, developed countries pledged collectively to mobilize $100 billion annually to support climate change efforts. The same applies to development aid, which was set at 0.7% over 50 years ago. To date, none of these promises have been fulfilled. Cameroon believes that it is time for these funds, which were expected to be effectively mobilized to support the substantial efforts made by developing countries, especially in Africa, to preserve our shared environment for the benefit of all. On another front, Cameroon is mobilizing resources for major projects in education, health, infrastructure, and rural development, etc., all aiming to bring about structural transformation in our country. We take this opportunity here to thank our multilateral and bilateral partners who support us in this endeavor. And we encourage them to strengthen this partnership to help us achieve our goals. Your Excellencies, the Pact for the Future and its two annexes, namely the Digital Compact and the Declaration for Future Generations, require that we implement them. Similarly, the recent final documents that came out of the Nice and the Seville conferences, as well as the Yaoundé Declaration on Sustainable Blue Economy in the Gulf of Guinea, reaffirm commitments regarding financing and access to technologies, especially in this digital and artificial intelligence era, as decisive factors for promoting sustainable development. Cameroon welcomes these advances and the commitments made during these occasions for reforming the international financial architecture and advancing energy transition. My country aspires very much to see the realization of other long-awaited reforms, notably that of the United Nations Security Council, to allow Africa to occupy its rightful place in line with the Esselwini Consensus and the Sirte Declaration. When it comes to human rights, Cameroon welcomes the drafting of the International Pact on the Right to Development. The eventual adoption of this important instrument will mark a milestone in human history by unequivocally affirming that development is a fundamental right and not a privilege. Madam President, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, at this pivotal moment in the history of the United Nations, we must act. It is imperative obligation that we cannot ignore. This requires, in my view, respecting our commitments to development financing, fulfilling our promises for peace, and ensuring the effectiveness of our choices in human rights and humanitarian assistance. In the years to come, we must strengthen the foundations of lasting peace, rooted in prevention, resilience, and justice. And we have the means to do so, especially now when global wealth in 2025 has reached unprecedented levels and technological development allows for significant improvements in living conditions for all. In conclusion, and as a call to action, we must do better and we must do more so that the United Nations fulfills the promises made to the peoples of the world and becomes, more than ever, the engine of strengthened multilateralism, fair and equitable cooperation, and reimagined solidarity in the face of the concerning rise of multipolarity. I thank you for your kind attention.
I thank the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Cameroon. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Espen Barth Eide, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Norway.
Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. 80 years ago, against the backdrop of the Second World War, world leaders gathered in San Francisco to sign the UN Charter, to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. This once-in-a-generation moment brought the idea of the United Nations to life. Let us imagine for a moment that we are there in San Francisco in 1945 as the UN was negotiated. Participants who were at my age would have experienced the First World War, the short-lived Roaring Twenties, the Great Depression of the 1930s, fierce trade wars, the rise of fascism and Nazism, the Second World War, the Holocaust, and the nuclear bomb. And all of that in their own adult life. If events like these constitute your life experience, you do not believe that the world is a rose garden. Those who shaped the United Nations were not guided by naive idealism. Quite on the contrary, this was a deep realist recognition that mankind simply could not continue as before. Centuries of great power rivalry, competing spheres of interest, and imperialism had not forged peaceful coexistence. The founders, however, were indeed visionaries, as they believed that a better world was possible. Our founders realized that the world needed shared norms and principles in order to avoid yet another world war. They were adamant not to repeat the debacle of the interwar years. This noble insight shaped the United Nations Charter. Simply put, the Charter rests on three sets of principles. Peace and security should be achieved through recognizing the sovereign equality of states, the prohibition of the use of force, and through peaceful settlement of disputes. Economic and social development should be ensured through close international cooperation and through finding common solutions to common problems. The dignity and worth of all human beings should be established through mutual commitment to universal human rights. Our United Nations, imperfect as it is, has since provided an unrivaled global arena for seeking common solutions to common challenges. There is little doubt that the world would have been a more brutal and less prosperous place without the United Nations. Since 1945, interstate wars have been fewer and further apart. Former colonies gained independence and became sovereign states of their own. Hundreds of millions have been brought out of poverty. President, however, at 80, we find our United Nations in crisis. This crisis is both political and financial. Political, because core principles of the Charter are under threat. The world is more divided, more dangerous, and more unpredictable than it has been for decades. Respect for international law is eroding. Gross violations go unchecked. This, in turn, weakens the trust in our institutions. It is a vicious cycle. The crisis is also financial, because several member states are significantly reducing their economic contributions, and this, in turn, makes it difficult to accomplish the core mission of the United Nations. President, savage wars are raging in several corners of our world. In Sudan, civilians are facing the largest displacement and hunger crisis in the world today. The war in Sudan has been raging for almost 900 days. This is but one of the many horrific wars that receives way too little attention in the power centers of the world, even in this organization. In Ukraine, Russia has violated the most fundamental principles of international law. There is simply no other way of seeing it. Russia's invasion of the sovereign state of Ukraine is a blatant violation of Article 2.4 of the UN Charter. While Ukraine is in its full right to defend itself, as affirmed by Article 51. Norway and so many other states stand firmly with Ukraine's fight for freedom and independence. We do so in solidarity with the brave Ukrainian people, but we also do so to uphold the respect for international law, an interest shared by all states, large and small. In Palestine, Israel is in clear violation of international law. Life in Gaza is living hell. For almost 2 years, we have witnessed extreme levels of death, starvation, forced displacement, and massive suffering. The fact that these atrocities continue is a disgrace to all humanity. In the West Bank, the illegal occupation, settlements, and settler violence continues unchecked. The Palestinian authorities are under massive stress, its finances strained, and its capacity to operate is severely restricted. The war must end now. Massive humanitarian aid must reach those in need now. The remaining hostages must be released now, and the illegal occupation must end now. But, colleagues, there is an alternative to this never-ending cycle of violence. We have made important steps just these past few days. At the Conference on Palestine in this hall on Monday, member states further developed the roadmap to a settlement to the deeper conflict between Israel and Palestine. By now, 159 member states have recognized the state of Palestine as a contribution to the realization of the two-state solution. However, the recognition of Palestine is only one of the elements needed to reach such a two-state solution. There are many pieces in this puzzle. Palestinian governance and economy must be strengthened. Hamas must be demobilized. We need security guarantees to both Israel and Palestine. And key Arab states aim to normalize their relation with Israel as part of a broader agreement. In order to put together these pieces of the puzzle, the Global Alliance for the Implementation of the Two-State Solution was launched here in New York last year during the last UNGA. It continues to gather support for a comprehensive settlement. It is our firm conviction that both Israel and Palestine have the right to live in peace and security, side by side in 2 states. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, a world order based on international law is not a luxury, it's a necessity. When we condemn Russia's blatant violations of international law in Ukraine, we must also speak just as clearly against Israel's violation of the rules in Palestine. International law cannot be applied with double standards. It must be upheld universally, regardless of who commits the violations and regardless of where they take place. This is not optional, this is fundamental. We must also defend the institutions that safeguard accountability, the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court. Just as important as the sacrosanct integrity of borders and the sovereign equality of states is our mutual commitment to human rights. The UN Charter commits us to respect and promote these fundamental freedoms for all, without distinction to race, gender, language or religion. Human rights are universal. They are our best hope for a world that rejects injustice, inequality, violence and brutality. A more equal world where women and girls participate on equal footing with men and boys is a more peaceful and a more prosperous world. President, in these times of crisis, the United Nations must reposition itself to meet a new political and financial reality. The UN 80 initiative gives us a unique chance to turn this crisis into an opportunity and to build a United Nations that is not only stronger but also smarter. As a country with an unwavering commitment to the United Nations, I can say this with conviction. It is time for some tough love. We want a UN that is stronger, yet leaner. A UN that is more efficient. A UN with structures optimized to deliver real impact where it matters most, on the ground, with the people we serve. We need a UN with sharper prioritization of resources, clearer mandates, and a UN that works smarter, not just harder. This is also a moment for self-reflection for all of us as member states and for our United Nations. As member states, we have contributed to a proliferation of mandates, long, complicated, overlapping, and burdened with endless reporting requirements. My country, Norway, is not exempt. We too are guilty as sin. The time has come to change this. We need bold and ambitious reform. We must stand firmly behind the Secretary General to drive this forward. We need a UN that can continue to uphold the rules and the principles that have underpinned our international order for the past 80 years. And we need a UN 80 process with a roadmap for the next Secretary General. When she assumes office in 15 months, she must be able to head the reformed UN fit for the next 80 years. President, we need a global convention on tax cooperation. States have the primary responsibility to provide essential service to their people. Then we must enable states to fulfill this duty. The capacity to tax both citizens and companies is paramount. It is the backbone of public service delivery, the engine of resource redistribution, and the cornerstone of sustainable development. We know what works, but we must assure that it can work for all. Colleagues, let there be no doubt. The climate crisis is real. It is here, it is man-made, and it's affecting the lives of millions of people around the world. As an Arctic nation, we experience some of the fastest paces of climate change anywhere on the planet, and we feel its impacts in our everyday life. The science is irrefutable. Observed warming is outpacing predictions. Curbing global warming and making peace with nature is the greatest collective challenge of mankind. We have no time to lose. Yet over the past decade, the world has achieved significant progress in this area. At COP28 in Dubai, nations united around the goal of phasing out fossil fuels in a just, orderly and equitable manner. Today, countries, regional organizations, companies and investors are beginning to recognize a fundamental truth. Embracing the technologies of the future, low on carbon, high on circularity and responsible resource management, is not an obstacle to growth. It is an opportunity for growth, innovation and a sustainable future. Norway must build on this momentum. COP30 in Belém presents a crucial opportunity to reconnect the climate, biodiversity and pollution agendas into a coherent, integrated approach. President, as we mark the 80th anniversary of our United Nations, let us protect the foundations for peace, human rights and development. The norms and the principles are not the problem. They are just as relevant for the world today as they were back then. What does deserve scrutiny is the system we have established to protect and enforce these norms and principles. And that is what the UN 80 is all about. Let us make sure that these principles apply for all people, everywhere, all the time, so that in another 80 years, future generations do not have to build a new version from the ashes of another devastating world war. It is up to us to find the answers that fit the 21st century. But when it comes to the core purpose, we should take the cue from our founders. We are, indeed, better together.
I thank the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Norway. We have heard the last speaker in the general debate for this meeting. We will continue the general debate tomorrow at 9 a.m. in this hall. The meeting is adjourned.